Right then. So this is a Golf GTD that we've had in for a few weeks to do a little bit of development work on. It's been a bit of a pain, to be honest. There's been a lot of work, a lot of new stuff for us. The customer requested we do some certain stuff that we'd not done before, so you're well aware of the time scales and what we could achieve and what we're expecting. We've missed the mark a little bit, but it's not our problem. It's blame Volkswagen. They've created an engine that's too efficient for its own good, which means it's no good for tuning. But we'll look at the car first. It's a very tidy example, to be honest. It's fairly new, 2015 model. We've upgraded the brakes to some Brembo 4-pots. They work pretty good, to be honest. They're really nice brakes. But this car's done 110,000 miles. It's come from Ireland, so it's in kilometres, I have to think about it. So it's not a low mileage example. It's not factory fresh, so a lot of people ask when the cars have done these sort of mileage, is it the end of the line for it? Not the case. When we stripped it down, we went quite deep into this just to see if there were any issues that we'd not seen before, and the rod bearings are not the same part number as the earlier engines, and they'd started to wear. So while we were there, new rod bearings, the sputter type from the earlier, like what we're running the Arosa, stuff like that. ARP bolts, that should be fine, it'll take some decent power. Rods look pretty similar to what the early type engines are. They very rarely break or bend. For this sort of power level, we didn't see it necessary to be putting any H-beams in. But if we have a quick look at what we've done, it's pretty hard to see, to be honest. The turbo's here with an older style electronic actuator, because that's the one that fits properly. 3-inch downpipe, and this turbo's one of our GTD 2872 VRs. It's ball bearing, billet wheel, really big lightweight turbine. The turbine wheel on this is lighter than our old 25. Compressor wheel's a little bit heavier because it's quite a bit bigger, 72mm versus 66. So, but it works really well. Spool's really nice transient response, really good. So when we're working through all this as a project, we knew that we'd be struggling on the fuel pump side, because the fuel pump on these is the same as size-wise as the earlier engines, which we know stop at 240, 250 horsepower. So we didn't expect to making crazy power. So this is in its finished state. We worked our way up, which we've got some dyno graphs to look at in a minute and what it did. But we've worked our way up to from the standard hardware, still with a DPF, then got rid of all that stuff, put a 2260 on there, pretty much maxed out the fuel system, put the upgraded fuel pump on, then we maxed out the head flow. Various reasons why, which we can have a look at in a minute, but it's not a good design standard. So then we tried the 28 turbo just to prove to the customer that he wouldn't achieve his goal by having the 28 on the standard head, even with as much fuel as you could have. Because these injectors are fairly large on these, probably 350 horsepower's worth maybe, depending how efficient everything else is running. So we showed him that he wanted more power, so the only options were to buy another head, get it ported, bigger valves, and then see what difference that made. But the head design inherently is not ideal. It's not a performance orientated design. If we have a quick look at it in a minute, it's more for efficiency rather than all out power. So the gains that we had overall are not what we'd see from like the earlier oval port engine. We'd be at least 60 horsepower ahead of this, which is a shame because these cars they're really nice. But what we're going to do for people in the future entirely depends on what they want to do, because there's a lot of reasons why swapping to the earlier engine it'd be very difficult, because there's just tons of extra stuff on this. variable cam timing instead of having swirl flaps. They've got the charge cooler instead of an intercooler, which, to be honest, the charge cooler does work very well. I think the highest inlet air temps we've seen on this, 45 degrees, something like that. Sustained on track, to be confirmed, but as far as road use is concerned and dyno pulls, it's more than adequate. They do a bigger version of this from the 240 horsepower per sat, but as you can see here, there's no room for anything. Our little boost gauge takeoff there that we make a little fitting that fits in before the standard map sensor, but there's just pipes everywhere, so upgrading anything on these engines is a task in itself. So, and putting a front mount intercooler on is pretty difficult because I've got this radar sensor here to stop you crashing. So you can thank the crash test guys for all this sort of stuff. You can't have an intercooler on these because of that. But the charge cooler works pretty well, so it's not an upgrade that needs doing. We get a lot of people asking. As much as we love to take money off people, that's not required. It's not ethical, so we try not to. So yeah, going down a step and using the older engine would possibly net some gains, but it'd have its other challenges because the block's different, the head's different, the sump's different, some mounting points are different. It's not just going to be bolt straight in. Definitely doable. What other problems you'd have, it'd take a little bit of ironing out. This car, the customer wanted the standard airbox. We've done a little bit of testing on the dyno, and from what we can tell, it's a very good design anyway. We've got quite a lot of scoops going in, all the sort of width of the grille into the bottom of the airbox, up through the top. So we've done some testing with no air filter, AEM air filters. It made no difference other than the AEM filter sound a lot nicer. If you want to have an oil type filter, we discourage them because they kill your MAF sensor. So AEM, dry flow, or keep your standard paper filter on this platform. This is a better airbox design than the Mark 6 stuff. They are a little bit restrictive. So we'll have a quick look at the old stuff and some of the new stuff. We've laid a little bit of what we've got out because you can't see any of it. So we'll have a quick look. There's not really going to be any order to this. We're going to probably skip him back and forth because there's quite a lot to think about. But to start with, this is the standard DPF on this model. Absolute crazy thing. You've got a cat and a DPF separate. The idea behind this is to get everything as close as possible to the engine, to keep everything as hot as it can be. Hot exhaust is easier to treat than cold exhaust. That's why when DPFs are regenning, your fans come on, you get warning lights on your dash, it starts smelling a little bit. It's because everything's running hot like this. When it's regenerating, after an hard run, you're probably looking at 900 to 1,000 degrees in here, centigrade, which is crazy. So you don't want to be touching any of this when it's regenerating. But as well, another thing on this MQB platform, which is what all these Mark 7 Golf sort of chassis cars are, all this stuff is built on the engine as it comes as a power unit, because it's all modular, everything's sort of built separately, and they lift everything up together. So to get the DPF out on these, you're near on taking the engine out. You've got to push everything forward, get tons of room in there, so it's not an easy job to do on your back at home, which is a shame because everybody knows all this stuff's rubbish. But yeah, you need to factor in that it's a lot of labour just to get the DPF out. You get people wanting to roll these out and put them back together. Very difficult to get any seals and gaskets, and there's like clamps holding these bits together. Pretty difficult to get those. You've also got, there's a high pressure EGR valve that shoves into the side of that as well. So you've got all this stuff hanging down the back of the engine, where normally on an old type engine you've got nothing. So it is pretty difficult. So we'll look at the dyno graphs for the standard hardware, and then we'll look at the turbo and see how we get on there. So these are the dyno graphs that we've got So the car came in supposedly with a 230 horsepower tune. It did 188 and 325 foot-pound of torque. So what we did, we flashed it back to standard, and on the, I've not got it on this graph here, but standard it only did 170. That was the latest software revision, which is like the emissions fix software. So we flashed it back to the previous one, which is 177, which is 4 or 5 short of the 181 horsepower, 184 PS that these are meant to do standard. So they always fall a little bit short. Around 280 foot-pound of torque, which is exactly what these come from the factory with. So then you can see we got 209.7 horsepower. You can see here, I've highlighted a little bit on here. We get a big rise in power, and then it starts to drop, and away it goes. This still had the DPF at this point, and the tune had not been optimised. We spent tons of time doing it because we knew the end goal weren't to leave the standard hardware on. But you can see here the power drops off because we sat on in 920 degrees Celsius EGT limit exhaust temperatures. That's always going to be the limit on engines like this. It's not going to be the torque, it's not going to be the power, it's going to be how hot the exhaust gas temperatures are going to get. So these too hot, stuff starts to melt. So if you look here, people are claiming 230, 240 horsepowers. Where's it going to get it? It's already getting too hot here, around 4,000, 4,200. It's just going to be impossible. You can't do magic things, you can't do wizardry, it's just impossible. You're going to get 210, 215, depending how good quality everything is that's on there, what condition it's in. That's your lot. So if you want to do more than that, you need to fit a bigger turbo. So we'll just have a quick look at the standard turbo and might get an idea of why these are so limited. So this is the standard GTD 1449. So if you think about it compared to like the earlier engines, they had GT 1749. So you've gone from a 17 down to a 14, which the numbers are not correlating to an exact size, it's a frame size, but these are small. Like the 1.6s went from a 14 down to a 12, and some of the bigger engines, like this is a 184, the 190s are very similar, but some of the bigger earlier engines have got like a 15 on there, so they still never went up to a 17 size, so they are quite small. But these have got, pretty difficult to see, but they've got a billet wheel in a standard, and it also looks like it's made from titanium, but it's not. It's a titanium nitrate coating, and that's because of this. There's another EGR goes into a low pressure EGR, and that's quite acidic, so that's just a coating to stop wear. But then if you look here, this is, I've not got one of our GTD 2872 wheels to hand, but this is one of our older GTB 25 wheels. Just look at the size difference. It's just the inducer on this one, and definitely the inducer on the 2872 is bigger than the exducer on this. Off the top of my head, I've not measured this one exactly, but it's a 14 juicer or thereabouts, 38 inducer, and a 49mm exducer. These are 40, off the top of my head, 46 inducer. The 2872 is a 50 inducer. So the inducer of this wheel in this car at the minute is bigger than the exducer on this. Turbine wise, a lot bigger, and a lot difference in flow, and a lot different characteristics as well, because the idea behind these smaller ones, they've opened them up quite a lot, so the spin, they don't give as much energy to the turbine and the compressor. They just want as much flow as possible from the minimum restriction, which these work very well. You can get peak torque at 1500 RPM or so, which for a turbo that does 210 horsepower is very, very good. It's not achievable on the earlier hardware, but it's still a restriction. This turbo on an earlier engine, if it fitted easily, would be a decent upgrade as well. But for this engine, there's a lot of other restrictions in place, not just the turbo, but 210 horsepower or thereabouts, your turbo's your limit. Everything else has got a little bit more in it, the turbo's not. So the next step, once you've fitted a bigger turbo, using our custom manifold, downpipe, water pipes, come with all the gaskets, some bolts and stuff missing here, come with all these, come with silicon inlet as well. But once you've got to that, you've fitted your bigger turbo, you're still going to need a fuel pump if you want to take it and stretch and max out your turbo, or try to. So this is the standard CP 4.1 pump that's fitted to this engine. Pretty small, and the reason it's called a CP 4.1, and as I've probably said on a previous video for the Audi project that we've got, they're a 4.2, which looks the same as that, just a mirror image. It's got two plungers. So every time this rotates, you've got one plunger, goes up and down, pushes out high pressure fuel. These are terribly unreliable if the fuel's not absolutely perfect and perfectly filtered. So in places like America, where their fuel's shocking, they kill these for fun. Not as big a problem in England, but we do have them, we do see them, especially if you put petrol in. These just go straight away, and then all the bits that come out of this straight through in injectors. But in essence, the way that these work is the same. It's a pump, it draws fuel in through one of these pipes, compresses it, whatever's not being compressed returns out of here. The high pressure fuel feeds the fuel rail, and away you go. This is your metering valve. We do an upgrade for this pump that gives you another 5 or so horsepower just to eke that last little bit from it. It's like a bit over 100 quid's worth of parts, so it's a worthwhile upgrade, but still you're going to be limited by this. But your metering valve is just a solenoid. They work exactly the same. They've got the same principle. It's just a little spring that just opens and closes an orifice inside there. So when you go to a CP3 pump, the difference in that is that these have got free plungers. So for every rotation of the pump, you're getting 3 pressure cycles, and then it comes out of this pipe at a different orientation slightly to this one. And you've got tons more flow. These displace twice as much fuel as this. The reason that new modern engines don't have these on is because they're just not as efficient as far as low RPM, low throttle, starting, them sort of situations. Stuff we're not interested in when we're wanting more power from an engine. But as far as service life, these are the sort of pumps that are on your trucks that are doing millions of miles, that are maybe not getting service as much as they should. They're a lot better. The CP3 pump's always the one that you go to a CP3 if your CP4's not behaving. But if you look at how these are designed as well, they're a lot more simplistic, a lot less parts to go wrong. These have got silly little rollers, everything's DLC coat because it's so tiny and small and wears out easily. These, they just work. There's some bracketry included to make this fit exactly as we'd hope it would, but it's a worthwhile upgrade. It works a ton better on earlier engines, which we'll go into a bit more detail as to why in a minute, but these are a good upgrade. So we'll have a quick look at the head and the cam setup, and that'll probably explain to some people. I might skip past some obvious stuff, I might skip past some stuff that's not so obvious. So the head on these, pretty difficult because it's still together to see what's going on and to film it, but if you look down there, maybe we've got a torch kicking about up there. But if you look inside here, you can see one valve, it's there nicely at the front, but the other one is right at the back. So as far as direct airflow is concerned, you're aiming most of your flow straight down the front valve. But why they do this is to get swirl. The one valve to be doing the filling, the other to be doing the swirling, and the variable cam timing fits in with this as well. So if we flip the head to the side that you can't see when it's in the engine, normally an engine like this would be inlet, inlet, exhaust, exhaust. But not on this engine. You've got inlet, inlet, exhaust, exhaust. So you've got one's coming there and one's having to come down the side of this one and down here. So this is inherently one of the reasons why this engine's just incapable of producing the power that we want it to produce. So the valves are so close to the outside that you can't upgrade both of them. You can only upgrade one of the inlets and both of the exhausts. So straight away we're not going to be flowing as much as the earlier engines. So these are the cams. In a conventional engine, this is the front, inlet, exhaust. Not the case with this. Obviously we've looked at the head and one of these is inlet, one of these is exhaust. So you've got inlet, inlet, exhaust, exhaust. So the variable cam timing on this is not varying the phase angle between the opening of the inlet and exhaust. It's varying which one of these, with the short or the long inlet and the long or the short exhaust, which one of those is getting the air sooner. So that's, instead of running swirl flaps, they can do it through there, so they can vary the exhaust and the intake flow through this variable cam timing. They ditched this on the 240 horsepower engine, which is a very similar design as far as the block's concerned, but the head's totally different. It's not the same casting, it's not got the same offset valves, it's totally different. So this is why these are a bit of a pain. But the other thing, that wouldn't be a problem. We'd just get rid of the variable cam timing like they did on the 240 horsepower engine, and we'd put upgraded cams in. These cams, no way coming out. This ladder is stuck, welded, sealed together. So this is a cam module. It's not just a pair of cams. So it's impossible to upgrade, and they're a very mild profile as well. We've measured it. It's milder than the standard, like earlier oval ports, which they stick at probably. We've not really tried them with a ported head with arc cams because that'd be a waste of time, but you'd be stuck at 280 horsepower maybe on one of those. So we knew when we got this and started measuring it that this was going to be a problem. We just hoped that the valve porting, the valves and the porting, sorry, it'd increase it a lot, because the valve springs are the same, so we upgraded those. The rockers are the same, so they're fine, we have no problems with them. The injectors, we've tested these injectors in engines and we know they're fine. So we've got a decent recipe, but this was going to always be the restriction. So we knew it weren't going to be good. Obviously, knowing that the Passat 240 has got inlet and exhaust, not shared like this one, that's not even an upgrade. So you're stuck. You think, well, just put the Passat head on. Finding a used head, not easy. Find a new one, $2,500, and I'm still not convinced that they'll bolt on. Let somebody have a go and see how that works out. But it's not something that we wanted to do. So we're stuck. My hands are scruffy, so we'll before I start touching my computer and picking dyno graphs up, I'll go wash them. So upgrade wise, we've got the turbo 2260/28, they'll look the same. CP3, boost gauge tapping. We've got, pretty hard to see, we're a 2700 bar fuel pressure sensor. This is running about 2300, 2400 bar of rail pressure. It's as much as you need to be doing what we're doing here. And we've also, when we did the ported head, the bigger valves and the valve springs, we put upgraded head bolts. Studs can't fit these engines. There's just not enough room to get a nut in. They're absolutely tiny. I've got one kicking about in here somewhere. I'll get me clean hands dirty again. But the head bolts in these are standard, 10.9 grade. The ones that we put in, 12.9. So they should take a decent amount of power. Would be nice to be able to get head studs in. It's just impossible. There'd be the nut would have to be too shallow and be touching the cam. So we'll have a little look at what it actually achieved and the stages at which it achieved it, which is, like we've said already, it would have been lovely to have got 360 horsepower out of this, maybe more. But the inherent problems with the head, the design flaws, no matter what you do, you can't overcome those. So if you look here, this is a dyno graph showing the comparison between the standard fuel pump and the CP3. We're expected to see bigger gains than this, but we hit the standard head limits. Pretty much, as far as peak power is concerned, there's a couple of horsepower difference, but if you can see here, we've got probably 15 foot-pound and sort of almost 10 horsepower all the way, but then around 4600, so revving it pretty high, about 4600, we sat on that 920 degree limit. We could have lifted it and had a nice flat curve and gained a little bit, but that wouldn't be an accurate comparison. We want to leave the limits the same and see when we hit them. Do quite a few runs. It's not just one run and say, yeah, that's where the limit is. We do quite a few runs and make sure there's nothing different there. But the rail pressure was the same all the way through the run, whereas on this orange line, the rail pressure would start to drop. So the CP3 pump is an upgrade, but in our opinion, unless you're doing the head, there's no point doing this CP3. So it is an extra chunk of work that needs to be done that's quite costly. So then we're showing the figures with the 28 turbo because those were the best curves that we got, best comparison figures. So we didn't do enough with the 22 beforehand to get the before and after. But anyway, that's by the by. If you look here, we've got a good 25 horsepower gain from having the ported head. Not as much torque at low end. This is just a difference in from dyno run to dyno run. There are a few days between this. I think, what, 10 days or something difference between these runs. So the ported head, it did do a decent difference, has made a big increase. The EGTs between these runs are pretty much the same, if not a little bit lower. On the dyno, we probably sat at 900s now rather than 920s. On the road, it'll get up to the 920. But we've softened it really off now because we're happy to sit at 920, as not to sacrifice any power. So the ported head, if you didn't fit the CP3 pump, you'd still be stuck at 250s, even with an upgraded metering valve. So there's no point doing the ported head without the CP3, so it needs to be lumped together. As far as the ported head service, we sell the valves, we sell the springs. Activate it yourself or get somebody who knows what they're doing to have a go. It's not a service that we're offering at the minute. We want to get a nice CNC program sorted, but the demand for these are not going to be as vast as we'd hope, because you're limited at that 286 horsepower figure. On our dyno, obviously, we always get into these debates. I've had more power and they've had more power, but dyno wise, that's what it's got. But then this here, because we did a bit of testing with the 2260 before we put the 28 in, the green lines are the GTB 2260 versus the GTD 28. You can see there's an arrow pointing to it, but there's a lot more torque at 2400 compared to the GTD 28. It's a good few hundred RPM lazier. You've lost a bit of the top end, especially around sort of 48 onwards, where the 2260 is just not flowing enough air on this engine. to keep the EGTs cool, we had to lower the fuel down. So from 24 to sort of 36 on the road, the 2260 will feel faster. It's just inevitable. It's going to feel faster. It's all about the areas under the curve rather than just the peak figures. So if you had a tiny little blip here that were more, but tons more here, you've got a faster car. This is what we'd recommend people to have if they wanted to do it. 2260, and then if you get bored at 250 horsepower or so, you're going to have to spend a decent chunk of money to get another 25 horsepower and get you sent up to the 270s. We could have optimised that a little bit more and got a little bit more from it if we spent a bit more time, but the ultimate goal, the customer wanted the 2872, that were that. So that is, the 22 is the setup we choose. Obviously for a daily driver, 250 horsepower from an 184 horsepower engine, just bolting a turbo on and a couple of little bits. You don't need to do the head bolts if you don't want to, you don't need to do the rod bolts if you don't want to. You could literally just bolt the turbo on, probably for the 100 odd quid that it costs, put the metering valve on, get it tuned and be happy at 250 horsepower. It drove really nice at that. You'd be hard pressed for the layman to jump in one of these and say it feels tons faster with the extra 30 horsepower or so. You'd notice a difference at the bottom end. It's by no means undrivable. Like the customer said, oh, I don't know if it's going to be a sort of weekend car, I'm not going to be able to use it daily, it's not going to be easy to drive. It's absolutely fine. You could let anybody drive this, you could let anybody jump in it and they wouldn't know any different. You're not going to be sat there thinking, putting your foot down and thinking there's no power. It's pretty much smoke free, don't belch out any smoke at all, no visible smoke anyway. So it is still a daily driver. 2260, perfect. 28, a little bit lazier, a little bit more at the top end. If you like revving your cars, the 28's for you, but the 2260 is good as well. So we'll get out on the road and have a drive in it and see what it's like.